I'm Marnie Hughes, and this is Missing on NewsNation. Thank you for joining us. Each week, we feature missing person cases from across the country, no matter their background, race, religion, or circumstances. Many of the cases that we cover come from you and offer families and friends hope for answers, that their loved one comes home safely. Before we get to this week's case, we have some updates on several other missing people we've been following. 4 arrests have now been made in the disappearance of 2 missing moms from Kansas. Authorities believe Jillian Kelly and Veronica Butler were murdered. Butler was in a custody dispute with her children's dad. His mother, her boyfriend, and the couple's 2 friends are now charged in their deaths. The bodies of the women were located in a rural area 2 weeks after their abandoned car was found on the side of the road. Butler was in that custody dispute with her children's dad, and now those arrests. The case got very interesting this week as the 4 made their first court appearances, and the victim's family and friends had to be held back in court from going after the defendants, an emotionally charged room in Oklahoma. There is lots of new interest in the disappearance of Leona Kenzie. We featured her case recently in our Missing series. It's been 25 years since she vanished. Her daughter and the lead investigator in that case believe the Mexican cartel may be involved.
If Leona's disappearance does have something to do with the Mexican cartel, that is very problematic for me. They do horrific things to make people disappear, like put them in acid vats and liquefy their body and flush them down the drain.
Scary thought. Leona Kenzie is from La Grande, Oregon. She's a member of the Puyallup Indian tribe. If you have any information that can help in the investigation and the search for her, you can contact Lieutenant Jason Hayes with the La Grande Police Department. We also have an urgent missing case to tell you about. Police in Chicago are searching for a DoorDash delivery driver who often services the Hyde Park Loop area of the city. 24-year-old Elijah Okanala had dropped his mom off at work, and then he went to work himself. His brother tried calling his cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail.
He's very reserved and shy, really doesn't like trouble. No arrest history, no criminal history. Does his best to work, go out. All he does is go out, work, come back home.
Elijah drives a gray 2008 Honda Accord with the Illinois license plate number AH86525. The family says they keep checking their phones and they are driving around hoping for a miracle. If you have any information on Elijah's disappearance, contact Chicago Police. All right, now for this week's missing case, and it takes us to Texas and the search for a mother, daughter, and a friend. This week marks 5 years since Prisma Reyes vanished, and the day she disappeared was full of unusual twists and turns, from a dispute at work to a violent altercation on the road. In a moment, you're going to hear from a family spokesperson for an update on the search and investigation. But first, we have a closer look at Prisma Reyes' mysterious disappearance.
She left clues.
Baffling to me.
A video trail.
There's no way somebody did not see her.
She even left a little boy.
She was happy to be a mom, and she was excited.
It was Prisma Reyes' only child, Dominic, who set a frantic search in motion. April 17th, 2019, the 6-year-old's babysitter alerting police in Mesquite, Texas. Prisma was late picking up her son.
This was a little out of the ordinary for Prisma.
Sergeant Dustin Barrett and his team on the case quickly, as that babysitter's call came just 2 hours after Prisma was overdue.
We were talking about the case. We were then notified that Dallas Police Department had located Prisma's Jeep.
I believe in my heart she's still with us. I gotta have that faith.
Dan Fuchs is Prisma's stepfather and the only father she ever knew. He's candid about the day his daughter disappeared. It began with an argument at this used car lot in Dallas, where Prisma was a new employee.
The altercation that morning was apparently, this one lady felt that the parking spot closest to the building was hers.
Lunch brought her to E-Bar Tex-Mex restaurant, where she met up with an ex-boyfriend. The pair leaves, but Detective Barrett says Prisma returned alone to drink.
just talking with different patrons of the bar. She has a bit of a disturbance there. I believe they cut her off from drinking. She got a little upset, spilled a drink, and then leaves.
Cameras catch Reyes driving her white Jeep, rolling over a curb during a turn. NewsNation obtaining documents from what happens next, a road rage incident. At 5:05 p.m., 3 women call 911 reporting a suspect wearing a red polo in a white Jeep Cherokee pulled out a black handgun, cycled the slide, and pointed it at their car. At that same street, cameras captured Prisma parking, blocking an alley at the ex-boyfriend's apartment complex. She runs in through the car gate and appears unsteady, waiting for the elevator.
She seems a little bit intoxicated. She's stumbling around. She has the look of somebody that has had a few drinks and doesn't have all of her mental faculties about her.
This is the last shot of Prisma after she moves to a higher floor and is spotted crying.
It's real grainy and real fuzzy, but the clothing and everything seems to match what she was wearing, so we believe that's the last video that we have of her.
Prisma is never seen leaving the building. All eyes immediately on that ex-boyfriend, one Prisma years ago dropped domestic violence charges against.
He wasn't there. We have him on video leaving several minutes before she arrives. We know where he was, where he went. We have him on video at several locations.
On her demeanor and everything else and how she wasn't intoxicated. It's more like she was drugged.
Prisma did not take her gun on her run into the building. She left it visible in the front seat in her illegally parked Jeep. That car belonging to a man who police say she was quasi-involved with. Detective Barrett confirming there's no evidence to suggest he was involved.
It kind of kills me inside because I don't know if he copes with it to where he doesn't ask for his mom and he just keeps it to himself.
Dominic's father and Prisma split before the boy's birth. Arturo Garza says he was out of state during the disappearance, and alibi police say is supported by current evidence. Garza just wants to support his son.
I don't try to talk about it much because I let him cope it in his way, and I think that's the best thing to do. Let him express his emotions whenever he's ready.
Dan Fuchs will never stop working to find the little girl he so proudly raised for himself and a growing boy who deserves answers.
For me to know what happened to her, but mostly for him. And so that way, I could, if I'm on my deathbed, I could say, well, hey, Dominic, I've done everything I can do.
A family not giving up hope. Joining me now is Kaylee Palmer. She is a family spokesperson, a former private investigator, and current podcaster of The Undetected. Kaylee has spent hours investigating this case and Prisma's disappearance. Thank you for being with us. You were able to extensively track Prisma's driving the day she went missing. You say that you have some interesting information about a phone call coinciding with a U-turn Prisma made that day back to Dallas. What did you find out, Kaylee, about that phone call?
There are actually 2 interesting phone calls that triggered something for me to be interested in. One of those is definitely when she turns around. We mapped out her locations that day, and from where she was, where she left E-Bar and where she was ultimately found, her vehicle was at, and the last place that she was seen are only like a 1.2 miles, 1.3, give or take, away from each other. And so there was about an hour of time where she left E-Bar, and she received an interesting phone call right before the road rage incident. And it was from a burner cell phone. And something that I wasn't speaking on before, but I'm speaking on now, is that there was a burner cell phone. It was a Sanyo cell phone. If you ever Google that, it's old as dirt. It's one of those cell phones. And that was found at the crime scene. It was logged as evidence in the case, and we have that evidence log. And so we know that may pertain to it. Obviously, with burner phones, it's hard for us to be able to find out exactly where that, who that's registered to. We also have an interesting phone call where we think, based on where we had plotted her, and the weather was pretty bad that day at certain times. And so where we thought that she had to have turned around, she made a phone call as well. And both of those are very interesting to us because as she seems to be turning one way or going another, she's calling people or being called. And it seems like within a minute of her receiving the first phone call from the burner phone right before the road rage incident, it just hits the fan. I think that's ultimately what sets her off into I think she was scared. I think she thought someone was following her.
So you don't know the call that came in. Do you know about the call that went out? Was that also to a burner?
No, that was not to a burner. That was to a longtime friend that she had that was a photographer. Everyone that she spoke with that day have ultimately been all but cleared. To my understanding, no one has really been cleared. The clearest someone has been made is Ryan. And that's because it was put out there in the forefront that he met her at E-Bar. They were trying to rekindle their relationship, and she was found at his apartment. She also, when she was in the parking garage, she makes some phone calls to a number of different people, and she keeps saying, Ryan, where are you? What's going on? And so she was in a state that she was unsure of what was happening. And I think that all starts when she leaves E-Bar. And the phone call that she made, I feel that to the photographer could have, been because she was afraid. She just wanted someone on the phone to know, because I honestly feel in my heart that she was followed. And part of the way that we found that out was by plotting from the 911 incident and the road rage incident. There were more people that called that day about that incident than just the 3 girls that were in the car that had the road rage incident with Prisma. And so these other people gave locations as to where she went after this. She was only on scene for a few minutes. She left before cops got there, and she went straight down Haskell and past where they said that she initially took I-30. And I feel like, unfortunately, it was a very big missed opportunity for law enforcement to obtain any kind of CCTV footage from past I-30 through where she actually, we don't think she really got on I-30 until she turned around going towards White Rock Lake. And I feel like it was a huge missed opportunity for them to recover CCTV footage from a number of businesses and homes on the route that we think that she took. And unfortunately, we can't get that now, but we think she was followed, and that would be one great way to be able to find out if she was followed, and we just don't have that.
Wow.
Unfortunately, it's a lost opportunity.
Right. A lot of interesting information there. And I want to get to some police sound in just a moment, but the nature of that conversation, that phone call with the photographer, do you know what they spoke about?
To my understanding, everybody that she talked to that day, I have not been able to personally talk to the photographer, although I have talked to a number of other people. He was a family friend. They just kind of had a normal conversation. I don't think he was out of town, to my understanding. Like, he was states away. And so it could have been where she realized, okay, he's not here, he can't help me. And so she moves on. Or if she just needed some reassurance or had a question. But it's very interesting that at 2 key points in her disappearance, there are 2 big phone calls. In addition to some others, I mean, it places her in a certain spot, and we almost think like she had to have been followed.
Yeah, no, that's a key detail, and I appreciate you pointing it out. Dustin Barrett with the Mesquite Police Department. Here's more of what he had to say about the day and the area where she was last seen.
She could have very easily ended up in a high crime area just by leaving. Not every exit from that complex is covered on video. So we don't know for sure whether she left the complex or not. We pulled video from it was a wide radius from around that neighborhood, where we pulled ring videos from people's doorbells. We pulled surveillance videos from convenience stores that had views of the street, just trying to see if we could see her walking at any point, and we never did. We also checked that complex and parking garage very thoroughly, as to include elevator shafts and attics and any vacant storage building that they had there. The complex management was very helpful as far as giving us access to any of their public areas or areas that were for employees only. Things of that nature. Like they let us really search that complex.
Kaylee, any clues that you have uncovered at this apartment complex? We see her go in, we never see her come out.
There have been a few that have been uncovered. In the beginning, Dan, Prisma's stepdad, he had a friend who was working private security, and he had experience, and he kind of dabbled in the PI stuff. And so he offered his assistance just to Dan, like, look, what can I do for you? So he went over to the parking garage and was trying to interview people. Dan's been over there so much that he says that there's got to be his picture on the wall. He's been told he can't come back, even though there has been management change at the apartment complex multiple times since Prisma went missing. The apartment's not even called Olympus at Ross anymore, but that's what it was called when she went missing. And I know that the guy that went over there for Dan ended up coming across a lady who said that she saw Prisma at a car. It was a 4-door sedan, either silver or gray, and she seemed distraught. She seemed crying, or she seemed like she was crying. And the trunk was up, and there was a guy that she was standing next to. And due to like different interviews and the information that we compiled, it sounds like that same guy or a similar guy may have been in that apartment complex garage just a few days prior. And so we know that at one point she was seen for a fact by another person next to someone else. And so we've done a lot of digging into the people that we think may be of interest and the people that she knew and had any association with. And we have gone through the vehicles to see who owns anything that resembles a 4-door sedan or who did at the time. We have given that information to Detective Barrett to see if he will run that against the CCTV footage to see if someone entered that garage that was affiliated with her or exited that garage sometime that day. So I'm hoping that he's going to be doing that sometime shortly. I gave him that a while back. They haven't been giving any other additional details other than that video that you showed of her where Justin Barrett said that they think that it's her based on what she was wearing. It's on the opposite side of the garage where we initially see her on the phone. And that's really about all we have, unfortunately.
Yeah, you run out of clues at that point. Her stepfather, Dan, wonders if somebody that she met as a dancer could have some involvement in her disappearance. Have you talked to the club owners?
We have not talked to club owners. However, I have talked to some of the managers and people that she had worked with. And there's a few different clubs that she had worked at. And I know that there was a run-in situation actually at the first initial club that she had. So it's not someone that she necessarily met at the club that I know. However, I know that she, shortly before she went missing, a few months prior, her prior manager told me that he had actually met Prisma a couple years prior to her going into the dancing kind of field. And he actually got her first dancing job. And so he was very protective over her. They had become great friends. And she had returned back to him for something completely different. There was a guy that was with her, and again, few months just before she went missing, she shows up back at this club, and it's been said to me by someone who I have no reason to doubt that she came in asking to buy something she wouldn't normally, kind of, along the illicit part of things. Mm-hmm. And she said it wasn't for her, it was for the guy that she was with. And this guy got upset when there was no transaction that was going to be made. And it was either closing time or shortly before closing time. And he was asked to leave because he was acting irate. And Prisma was actually afraid. And so they shut down everything, locked up the doors. And this ex-SWAT guy, who's a big guy, it's my understanding he has tattoos everywhere. And he's just this big, bulky guy, almost looks like he's a bodybuilder. And he just starts banging on the door, wanting to get in. They actually took Prisma back to the back office and made sure that she was safe until he went away. And so there's a lot of interesting characters that have something to do with every aspect of her life, but also can be connected to some of the dancing bars. We've looked into the security. A lot of them run private security, and they have their own profiles on Instagram and stuff. We've tried to see if she has any relation to them or knew any of them. And we've also tried to see if there was anyone from the bar that had an interest in her from any one of those clubs, because people who stalk people, they have an obsession, a true obsession. And so even though we understand that she hadn't been dancing for a little while, unless she just hadn't told anybody, it's still very possible that, even as far as 2 years back when she had started, that there is someone that just had a true obsession with her. Yeah. We have not ruled that out, especially since we think someone was following her.
Yeah, peculiar, and a lot of information, Kaylee, that I hadn't heard before, so thank you for sharing that. The stepfather, Dan, again, says he started receiving some strange calls after Prisma went missing. What can you tell us about those calls, and might they have come from Prisma?
So they came from Mexico, and these calls started coming at random times where it was like in the middle of the night, and to my understanding, they were all different numbers, likely burner phones. We tried to track these numbers. All the information that we really have in databases when you're in the United States is primarily for the United States. There are some things that, like, if someone, traveled or moved temporarily over to another country, it might be listed as like a little note. For the most part, most of those we couldn't track down. Some of them we were able to determine they were likely burner phones, which again goes back to there was a burner phone that was found at the scene where she disappeared, and this was in the parking garage. There was also that burner number that called her from out of state, and that was right before the road rage incident. So I was actually on a podcast yesterday talking to a team, and there's a lady that's familiar with Houston, and she lives kind of in that area and lives in Texas. And she says she had been looking into some things and some crimes that actually people were missing, and they had a lot to do with cell phones coming from Mexico. So this burner cell phone that initially she received a call on did not have a country area code other than it was the United States. However, these others were blatantly coming from Mexico, and they were coming from different cities, but they were all around the same area. Wow. They almost stopped as abruptly as they came on. Like, it was out of nowhere. Dan called me almost hysterical, like, what is happening? This is just, it's got to be something. We thought it might be Prisma. She was born in Veracruz, Mexico, and some of the people that she had recently had ties with, especially men, have ties to Mexico. So we thought it was, and we were trying to track them down, call them back, everything that we could do. And they literally just, it seemed like as soon as we started ramping up, trying to get information on those numbers, everything disappeared.
Wow. Well, it could be the clue that we need to crack this case open 5 years later. Kaylee, I know you're invested in this. We'll be in touch for updates moving forward. Thank you, as always, for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us and raising awareness for Prisma. We really appreciate it.
Of course. And if you have any information that can help in the search for Prisma Reyes, contact police in Mesquite, Texas. The number 972-285-6336. And make sure to join us next week as we investigate a missing case of a young woman named Brittany T. Police say she was 35 years old, left the house where she lived with her boyfriend in Brookfield, Massachusetts on the night of January 10th, 2023, and she simply vanished. Susan T., Brittany's mom, says they spoke on the phone a half an hour before she vanished.
We had a brief conversation and she started to cry, and I asked what was wrong, and she said, "Oh, nothing, Mom. We'll talk about it later."
Brittany's family says that she would not have walked out that night onto the unlit road and into the freezing cold. Make sure to tune in next week as we take a closer look into Brittany's disappearance. And if there is a missing person case you think we should know about, send it to us at newsnationnow.com/missing. You can also send us tips through our NewsNation app. I'm Marnie Hughes in Chicago. This is Missing on NewsNation. As always, thank you for joining us. I'll see you back here next week for another missing case.